On the morning of September 4, 1939, mathematician Alan Turing arrived at Bletchley Park in Buckinghamshire just one day after Britain declared war on Germany. In his briefcase were mathematical theories that would help revolutionize code breaking. At that very moment, German U-boats were prowling the Atlantic, coordinating attacks through messages encrypted by a machine the Germans believed was unbreakable, the Enigma. The task before Turing seemed impossible. Every day, the German military sent thousands of encrypted messages through Enigma machines. With 159 quintillion possible settings, the Germans were confident their communications were secure. What they didn't know was that the key to breaking their code had already been discovered. 7 years earlier, by 3 Polish mathematicians working in secret in Warsaw.
The story of Enigma actually begins not in Britain but in Poland in 1932. Squeezed between Germany and the Soviet Union, Poland had every reason to fear its neighbors. The Polish Cipher Bureau, understanding this threat, took an unusual approach to code breaking. Instead of recruiting linguists like the British, they turned to mathematicians. Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Ruzicki, and Henryk Zagalski were brilliant young graduates from Poznan University. They spoke German fluently. Their city had only recently been returned to Poland after World War I. What made them special wasn't just their mathematical genius, but their understanding that breaking machine ciphers required mathematical thinking, not linguistic intuition. In December 1932, Rejewski achieved what seemed impossible. Using pure mathematics and permutation group theory, combined with intelligence obtained by French spies from a German traitor, he reverse-engineered the internal wiring of the Enigma machine without ever having seen inside one. It took him just 10 weeks. For the next 7 years, the Polish team read German military communications. They built their own Enigma replicas, created catalogs of rotor positions, and even designed an electromechanical device called the Bombe that could find the daily settings in about 2 hours. They were reading 3/4 of intercepted German messages. But the Poles kept their success completely secret, even from their allies.
By July 1939, war was inevitable. Germany had withdrawn from its non-aggression pact with Poland. The Polish General Staff made a momentous decision. It was time to share their breakthrough with their Western allies. On July 26th, in the Kabaty Woods outside Warsaw, a secret meeting changed history. Polish Cipher Bureau chiefs Guido Langer and Maximilian Chensky met with French cipher chief Gustave Bertrand and British representative Alastair Denniston. With them was Dilly Knox, a veteran codebreaker who had spent years trying to crack Enigma using linguistic methods. When the Poles revealed what they had accomplished, the British were stunned. The visitors were given Polish-built Enigma replicas and complete details of the breaking methods. Knox brought this intelligence back to Bletchley Park and handed it to a young Cambridge mathematician named Alan Turing. 5 weeks later, Germany invaded Poland. Rejewski, Ruzicki, and Zagalski fled through Romania to France, where they would continue their work until France itself fell. But their greatest contribution had already been made. They had given the Allies a 7-year head start.
Alan Turing had been born in London in 1912 and educated at Cambridge and Princeton. By 1939, he was already working part-time for the British government Code and Cipher School. When he arrived at Bletchley Park with the Polish intelligence, he immediately understood both its value and its limitation. The Germans had increased Enigma's security at the outbreak of war, and the Polish methods no longer worked effectively. Turing's breakthrough was to recognize that Enigma had fundamental weaknesses. The most important was that no letter could ever be encrypted as itself. If you pressed A on the keyboard, the lamp that lit up could be any letter except A. This seemingly small detail was Enigma's Achilles heel. Turing realized this could be exploited through something called cribs, educated guesses about what certain messages might contain. The codebreakers knew that every day, German forces sent weather reports. These messages almost certainly contained the German word for weather, Wetter. They also knew that many messages would end with Heil Hitler. By comparing the patterns in encrypted messages with these probable words, Turing could narrow down the possible settings dramatically. But checking these patterns manually would still take far too long. Turing designed a machine to automate the process. Building on the Polish Bombe concept, he created the Bombe, an electromechanical device that would systematically test rotor positions by looking for logical contradictions. The first bomb, nicknamed Victory, was installed at Bletchley Park on March 14, 1940.
But Victory had a serious problem. It needed menus with at least 3 loops of letters to work properly, and such patterns were rare in intercepted messages. The bomb was in danger of being a brilliant idea that simply wasn't practical enough to make a difference. Then Gordon Welchman, another Cambridge mathematician, had a revelation. Welchman realized that Enigma's plugboard connections were reciprocal. If G was connected to R, then R was also connected to G. He designed an additional circuit called the diagonal board that exploited this symmetry. When Welchman showed his idea to Turing, Turing was initially incredulous, but after studying the diagram, he became as excited as Welchman. The improvement was spectacular. The second bomb, nicknamed Agnes Day, or simply Agnes, was equipped with Welchman's diagonal board and became operational in August 1940. With this enhancement, the bomb could work with menus containing just a single loop, or sometimes none at all. The number of false stops, incorrect solutions, dropped dramatically. Now the machine was practical.
A working bomb was an intimidating sight. Standing over 6 feet tall and weighing about 1 ton, it contained 36 rotating drums arranged in groups of 3, each group simulating a complete Enigma machine. The drums were covered with 104 electrical contacts and rotated at different speeds, the clicking sound earning some versions the nickname machine gun. About 15 million delicate wire brushes had to make reliable electrical contact as the drums spun. By the end of the war, more than 200 bombs had been constructed. Most were operated by members of the Women's Royal Naval Service, known as Wrens, who worked long shifts in dark, stuffy rooms at Bletchley Park and outstations like Eastcote and Stanmore. The work was tedious and exhausting, but absolutely crucial. A single bomb could test all 17,576 rotor positions in about 20 minutes. The system worked like this. When an intercepted message was received, codebreakers would identify probable cribs, likely words or phrases in the plaintext. They would create a menu showing the relationships between encrypted and plaintext letters. This menu would be plugged into the bomb using a complex system of cables. The machine would then spin through all possible rotor settings, testing for logical contradictions. When the bomb stopped, it indicated a possible solution. But this was just the beginning. The stop had to be checked manually using a device called a checking machine to see if it produced consistent plugboard settings. Many stops were false, logical solutions that didn't actually work. But when a true solution was found, the day's Enigma settings were revealed, and all intercepted messages could be read.
By 1942, Turing's direct involvement with Enigma codebreaking was largely complete. The process had been mechanized and systematized. Turing was sent to the United States to advise on American bomb development in Dayton, Ohio, and to inspect encryption devices at Bell Labs in New York, including a device for encrypting phone calls between President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill. When he returned, Turing worked on speech encipherment and other projects. But Enigma was far from the only German cipher. The Germans had developed an even more sophisticated system called Lorenz, used for the highest-level strategic communications. Breaking Lorenz would lead to the development of Colossus, the world's first programmable digital electronic computer, designed by Tommy Flowers, but that's another story. Meanwhile, Bletchley Park had grown from a few hundred people to a vast intelligence factory, employing 10,000 by 1944. Three-quarters of them were women. They worked in shifts around the clock, breaking codes, translating messages, cross-referencing intelligence, and operating the Bombes and other machines. The secrecy was absolute. They had all signed the Official Secrets Act.
The intelligence from Bletchley Park contributed to virtually every Allied campaign. It helped prepare for D-Day in June 1944, the deception operation that convinced the Germans the invasion would target Calais rather than Normandy, relied partly on reading German responses through Enigma. It tracked German weapons development, including V-weapons and jet aircraft. It monitored the German economy and strategic decision-making. How much did Ultra shorten the war? Estimates vary, but most historians believe it was by at least 2 years, possibly more. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, called Ultra decisive to Allied victory. Those 2 years represented millions of lives saved, military and civilian, across Europe and beyond. It was one of the greatest intelligence achievements in history. But when the war ended in May 1945, something remarkable happened. Nothing. There were no announcements, no medals, no recognition. The bombs were dismantled, with most destroyed. About 50 were retained at RAF Eastcote for continued intelligence work, possibly against Eastern Bloc ciphers. The thousands of people who had worked at Bletchley Park simply went home, carrying their secret with them. The Official Secrets Act held. The full story of Bletchley Park remained classified until the mid-1970s, and many details weren't revealed until the 1990s. For decades, Rejewski, and Zygalski received no recognition for their pioneering work. When Poland fell under communist control after the war, it was politically unacceptable to publicize cooperation with the West. Rejewski maintained his silence for over 20 years to avoid attention from Poland's Soviet-dominated government.
Turing's fate was particularly tragic. In 1952, he was prosecuted for homosexual acts, which were then illegal in Britain. He was convicted and forced to undergo chemical castration as an alternative to prison. On June 7, 1954, at the age of 41, Alan Turing was found dead from cyanide poisoning in what appeared to be suicide. The man who had helped save millions of lives was destroyed by the very government he had served. For decades, few people knew Turing's name outside of computer science, where he was revered as a theoretical pioneer. The Turing test, the Turing machine, and the Turing Award all honored his work on computation and artificial intelligence. But his role as a codebreaker remained secret, his contribution to winning the war unknown to the public. It wasn't until the 2014 film The Imitation Game that Alan Turing became widely known. In 2009, British Prime Minister Gordon Brown issued an official apology for Turing's treatment. In 2013, Queen Elizabeth II granted Turing a posthumous pardon. In 2019, Turing was chosen to appear on the new £50 note, the highest denomination of British currency. The Polish codebreakers have also finally received recognition. In 2000, President of Poland, Aleksander Kwaśniewski, posthumously awarded Rejewski and Zygalski the Grand Cross of the Order of Polonia Restituta. In 2014, the IEEE honored all 3 Polish mathematicians with its Milestone Award for the first breaking of Enigma ciphers by the Polish Cipher Bureau in 1932 to 1939. A plaque at Bletchley Park now commemorates their contribution. The story of breaking Enigma is not about one genius working alone. It's a story of collaboration across nations and years. It began with 3 Polish mathematicians working in secret in Warsaw in 1932. It was enabled by French intelligence gathering. It was realized by Turing and Welchman's brilliant innovations at Bletchley Park. and it was executed by thousands of men and women working long shifts, keeping an absolute secret. The technical legacy is profound. The bombes were the first mass-produced specialized computing machines. They heralded the industrialization of information processing. The Colossus computer, built to break Lorenz, was a direct ancestor of modern computers. Turing's theoretical work laid the foundations for computer science and artificial intelligence. The organizational methods developed at Bletchley Park influenced post-war signals intelligence services worldwide. But perhaps the most important lesson is about the power of human ingenuity when driven by necessity. Rejewski, with limited resources and no access to the actual machine's internals, used pure mathematics to reverse engineer Enigma. Turing turned a theoretical insight into a practical machine. Welchman saw a way to make the impractical practical. Together, they achieved something the Germans believed impossible. Today, you can visit Bletchley Park and see a rebuilt Bombe, operated by volunteers who keep the memory alive. You can see where Turing worked in Hut 8, where Welchman revolutionized the process, where thousands of messages were translated and analyzed. An original Enigma machine sits in the British Library. These are more than artifacts. They're reminders that the most significant battles are sometimes fought not with weapons, but with minds. The Germans never knew. Throughout the war, they believed Enigma was unbreakable. They blamed their losses on spies, on carelessness, on luck, never on mathematics. Even after the war, when captured German cryptographers were interrogated, they remained confident that the steckered Enigma had not been broken. The secret held for 30 years after the war ended. It remains one of the greatest intelligence coups in history. As historian Asa Briggs, himself a wartime codebreaker, said, "You needed exceptional talent, you needed genius at Bletchley Park, and Turing's was that genius." But we should add, behind every genius stood other geniuses, and behind them stood thousands of dedicated people who made it all work. The story of Enigma is ultimately a story about what humans can achieve when necessity, brilliance, and determination combine to overcome what seems impossible.